Okay, let's talk a little bit about virtualization. Specifically, we're going to talk about what it is, who uses it, and why do we care. So what is virtualization? Here's a diagram of basically what your typical computer looks like, your laptop or your desktop computer. And at the base layer, we've got hardware. You know, you've got your CPU, your motherboard, your RAM, and everything that goes into physically making your computer work. And on top of that hardware, you've got an operating system, most likely Windows or I guess now they call it Mac OS. And that coordinates with your hardware and really tells your hardware what to do and makes things work and really makes that hardware useful. And then on top of the operating system, you install applications, and applications are the meat, and that's what you use to accomplish work, whether it's a web browser or a word processor or a video game, whatever it is, that sits on top of the operating system. And this diagram really shows how your typical computer operates. Virtualization looks a little bit different. In virtualization, we still have hardware at the base layer, and that's never going to change. But on top of the hardware, rather than an operating system, in high-end and server virtualization, you've got a hypervisor. And the hypervisor is still an operating system, but it is specialized to do what virtualization does, which allows multiple different, separate, isolated operating systems to operate on top of it. So rather than having one operating system on one set of hardware, you can have 3 operating systems or 5 operating systems on one set of hardware. And that allows you to do a lot of different things. So what kind of things? So typically virtualization, when we talk about virtualization, a lot of times we're talking about it in the context of servers. Servers use virtualization a lot, and we'll talk about why in just a minute. And then on top of that hardware of a server, you've got a hypervisor. Now, VirtualBox is one. VirtualBox is a different kind of hypervisor that runs inside of an operating system, but VMware and Microsoft Hyper-V are both hypervisors that can run directly on top of the hardware. And then on top of the hypervisor, you've got multiple operating systems. So on the right, we've got Linux, a Linux operating system, maybe running an application like an Apache web server. And on the left, we've got a Windows Server operating system running Microsoft's IIS, which is their web server, an application server. And on top of that, we might have PHP and a WordPress application running in that operating system. And the beauty of this is that those 2 operating systems, our Linux with Apache and our Windows with WordPress and IIS, are separate from each other. But they're both running on the same set of hardware. So what can we do with it? We can do all sorts of things. If you're using a Mac, you can use virtualization to run Windows on your Mac. You can use virtualization to run Linux on Windows. You can use virtualization to run Linux or to run Windows on Linux. You can do all sorts of different combinations of that. And the beauty is, if you are using Mac and you need to run an application that can only run on Windows, rather than using their boot camp and rebooting your computer, you can use virtualization to run Windows inside of your Mac operating system. And this is full-blown Windows. You can do anything with inside of a Windows virtual machine that you could do on a Windows computer, or almost anything. They're not great for games, but just about anything else you can do inside of a virtual machine. So that's that picture on the left, and on the right, we've got a picture of a guy who's running VMware, which is another virtualization product that's doing all sorts of things. So he has a virtual machine for a mail server, a virtual machine for a Minecraft server, a virtual machine for network-attached storage, a TeamSpeak server, and a firewall. And each of those virtual machines is running on one IP address, on one set of hardware, which is amazing. And it's awesome because it lets you configure each of those servers very, very specifically to the needs of your mail server, to the needs of your Minecraft server, and not interfere with the other applications that you might want to run. This is the time to stop and think. I would recommend pausing the video pretty soon after I ask these questions and really thinking, why would you use virtualization? So it lets us run an operating system inside of an operating system. What's the benefit inside of a computer lab? What might be the benefit at home? And then another one is, what's the benefit in an organization? We'll talk about some benefits, but make sure you take some time to think about those questions, because virtualization really, really is awesome. So benefits, one of the big benefits is isolating the environment. We've talked about it already. Your Windows and your Linux can be separate. This can be for all sorts of different reasons. For testing, if you want to test a certain piece of software and you're not sure how it's going to work and you're not sure how stable it is, it might crash your computer. So you don't want to use that on your main computer. You run it in a virtual machine instead. For security, keeping those applications isolated from each other. Or again, experimentation. If you just on your desktop, if you want to try out Linux and don't want to install it on your computer and take up space on your, or partition your hard drive and all the things that are involved in installing Linux, you can run it in a virtual machine, play with it, mess around with it, break it, and then just delete it when you're done, and it's totally fine. So it's that sandboxed environment where your virtual machine is all alone. Now you can configure a virtual machine to share resources, to share files on the host computer, but by default it's not. And by default that server inside of or that computer inside of a virtual machine is completely isolated from anything that you have on the host computer. I used this, for example, I had scammers calling me to try to get me to install a remote access application on my computer so they could convince me I had viruses and probably do all sorts of other things on it. So I installed Windows on a virtual machine and had them log into that, and so that I could watch them and see what they did and just kind of mess with them a little bit. And then delete the virtual machine afterwards, and no harm done to me. So better resource utilization. This is a big one, especially when you're talking about servers. And this is one of the biggest benefits inside of servers, inside of data centers, is better resource utilization. It is much, much cheaper to build one awesome computer than it is to build 5 smaller, less awesome computers. And if you build one awesome computer, then you can run 5 separate virtual machines, essentially 5 separate servers on that one awesome computer. And that means less space is used up in your data center, less power is going to be used up powering one computer versus 5. Even if they're smaller computers, just the efficiency there is a great benefit of virtualization. Easier to set up and take down. This is similar to what we talked about with the sandbox. It's super easy to create a virtual machine. It's super easy to shut down or delete a virtual machine. You don't even need to touch a server to be able to create a virtual machine and or delete a virtual machine. And it's possible to create a completely identical test and production environment, or nearly identical test and production environment. And this is important for software development because you want those two environments to be as similar as possible so that everything that works in your testing or development environment will still continue to work in your production environment. So who uses virtualization? Basically everybody. Anybody who's doing anything on the web, if you hear anything about the cloud, everybody is using virtualization. So if you have a web host, whether it's Squarespace or DreamHost or HostGator or any of those, they're going to be using virtualization to some extent, or they're at least offering some sort of virtualization. For example, a virtual private server like DigitalOcean. You can purchase a virtual machine for, I think, as low as $5 a month. DigitalOcean, there's other providers too. Rackspace will let you rent a virtual machine the same way. And then you have a Linux computer in DigitalOcean servers that you can do whatever you want with. And it's pretty dang awesome. Amazon Web Services, we'll talk a lot about them in other videos, but Amazon Web Services definitely uses virtualization extensively. Any sort of company that's doing computing, that's doing any amount of computing is going to be using virtualization for their own servers, for providing services to others, all of that, whether they're using their own servers or whether they're using something like Amazon Web Services for their services. Education, any university, including ours, University of Nebraska at Omaha, anybody in education is going to be using virtualization for something or another. And government as well, same thing. Again, basically everybody uses virtualization. So who provides it? Lots of organizations, lots of companies. VMware is a big one. They are one of the biggest in the enterprise as far as virtualization. And if you want to really, really, get into virtualization, I highly recommend checking out VMware. They have courses and certifications and things that allow you to really pick things up. Oracle's VirtualBox is an awesome one. I use it on my desktop, on my own computer to run my own virtual machines, and I use it in class to do labs and things because it's awesome and it's free. It's not quite as featureful or as high performance maybe as VMware, but it's free and it's a good enough solution for most desktop uses at least. And then finally, Windows Server has the Hyper-V services built into it, and actually later versions of Windows after Windows 8, if you have Windows 8 or Windows 10 Professional, you can enable Hyper-V on your own desktop and use that. Again, it's geared more towards servers rather than desktop environments. So if you want to do desktop environments like running a Windows machine inside of on your Linux PC or on your Mac, then I would recommend using something like VirtualBox or VMware's Fusion. If it's on a Mac, Parallels does the same thing. So the last thing we're going to talk about is Vagrant. And Vagrant is an awesome little piece of software that's designed to help you set up virtual machines. It's basically targeted towards developers. And what it allows you to do is set up a virtual machine super, super quickly and essentially share that virtual machine with others. So if you have specific configurations, specific software that you need installed in your virtual machine, specific settings that you need to set, you can configure that all with Vagrant, and then when you create the virtual machine, it's done. It's created and software is installed and everything is done all at the beginning, and you can share that configuration with others to set up the exact same environment. So like I said, for development, having a testing and production environment that are as the same as possible is super important. And so Vagrant helps with that by letting you set up a box, they call it, to do and to look like exactly what you want it to look like. And that's pretty awesome. So that's everything I'm going to say about virtualization. It's amazing. I recommend checking it out. I recommend downloading VirtualBox, playing with it, doing kind of whatever you want with it, because it's a really, really, really cool tool.